stop and let me ride.
Goes in the room. Then he comes out and he said, I don't ever want to see you doing this. He said, here. And I looked at him, I was like, didn't you just say not to ever take that?
Bootsy Collins never forgave this band member, and the reason runs deeper than most realize. What started as a groundbreaking partnership inside Parliament Funkadelic soon cracked under the weight of betrayal, addiction struggles, and power battles.
Because George was done. I mean, he was cooked. The crack, he was cooked,
The Funk's infectious grooves hit a darker story, a bitter feud that tore the band apart and forever altered the legacy of one of music's greatest families. Bootsy Collins never forgave George Clinton because, to him, Clinton betrayed both his trust and his talent in a way that cut deep and lasted a lifetime. When Bootsy joined Parliament Funkadelic, he gave everything: his creativity, his energy, and his loyalty. He believed in the band and in George as a leader, but over time, Bootsy saw that George controlled everything: the music, the money, and the people. Bootsy's contributions were minimized, and worse, he discovered that George was withholding royalties and manipulating contracts to benefit himself. Bootsy confronted George, demanding fairness and respect. Instead of addressing these concerns, George ignored or dismissed him, tightening his grip on the band's business and creative decisions. Bootsy felt used and brought into the fold only to be exploited and pushed aside. This wasn't just a business dispute, it was personal. George had broken the trust of the man who had been one of the band's biggest stars and most loyal members. Years of frustration and betrayal built into a bitterness Bootsy could never shake. For him, George Clinton wasn't just a band leader, he was a symbol of everything that went wrong. That's why Bootsy Collins never forgave him. Bootsy Collins wasn't just battling tensions with George Clinton and the internal politics of Parliament Funkadelic. He was also fighting a much darker enemy: addiction. His struggles with drugs didn't just threaten his health and career, they worsened the fractures within the band and deepened the rift between him and George. In the peak years of Parliament Funkadelic's success, the party atmosphere and the heavy touring schedule made drugs a common escape for many members. For Bootsy, substances like cocaine and heroin quickly became more than just recreational. They became a crutch and then a prison. His talent and charisma masked the pain and chaos brewing underneath. Bootsy's addiction affected every part of his life. On-stage performances were sometimes erratic, missed shows piled up, and his reliability came into question. Bandmates whispered about his downward spiral, and management grew frustrated. But the real damage was to his relationship with George Clinton. George was no stranger to drug use himself, but his increasing paranoia and control clashed with Bootsy's own battles. Clinton's tightening grip on the band's direction and business decisions coincided with Bootsy's growing instability. Instead of support, Bootsy often felt isolated and pressured, his drug use becoming a wedge between him and the leadership.
Because George was done. I mean, he was cooked. The crack, he was cooked.
This isolation fueled Bootsy's anger. He blamed George not only for the business betrayals, but also for failing to protect and support him during his worst times. To Bootsy, George's refusal to loosen his iron grip felt like a betrayal when he needed the band most. At the same time, Bootsy's addiction led to moments of recklessness and self-sabotage. Rumors circulated of dangerous behavior and clashes with other band members. His personal struggles made it difficult to focus on music or business, and the tension inside Parliament Funkadelic grew toxic. Ultimately, Bootsy's drug problems accelerated the breakdown of the band's unity. What began as a partnership rooted in creative genius and friendship dissolved into bitterness and mistrust. The funk was still there, but the family was broken. Bootsy's battle with addiction didn't excuse the damage, but it added a tragic layer to his feud with George Clinton. It showed how personal struggles and band politics became dangerously intertwined, making reconciliation nearly impossible. This chapter of Bootsy's life is a reminder that behind the funk and the flash, real human battles were being fought, battles that left scars no music could heal. Parliament Funkadelic was more than a band. It was a sprawling, chaotic collective of musicians, performers, and personalities. The creative energy was electric, but so was the tension. Behind the groundbreaking music lay a web of internal feuds, power struggles, and disputes that threatened to tear the group apart from the inside.
From the phone, I want you to free your mind and your ass will follow tonight.
Bootsy Collins' feud with George Clinton was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The band's size and complexity made conflicts inevitable. Multiple members vied for attention, creative control, and a bigger slice of the financial pie. Rivalries brewed quietly, then exploded into public clashes that fans and outsiders only partially saw. Money was a constant source of friction. Parliament Funkadelic's business structure was notoriously confusing. Contracts were tangled, royalties often went unpaid or misallocated, and transparency was almost non-existent. Many musicians, including Bootsy, felt exploited. They created the magic but saw little of the wealth. Disputes over songwriting credits, payments, and management decisions fueled resentment that simmered for years. Creative differences added fuel to the fire. George Clinton's vision for Parliament Funkadelic was expansive and eccentric, but not everyone agreed with his direction. Some members wanted more freedom to express their own styles, while others resented Clinton's heavy-handed control over the band's image and music. These creative clashes fractured relationships and led to splinter groups and solo projects. Bootsy's rising bitterness found echoes in other band members who felt marginalized or mistreated. Tensions often spilled over into arguments backstage, in the studio, and on tour. Rumors of physical fights and shouting matches circulated within the music scene, underscoring the volatile atmosphere. Amidst the chaos, some bandmates tried to mediate or maintain peace, but the band's rapid rise and complex personalities made unity difficult. The very passion that drove their revolutionary sound also ignited the personal and professional battles behind the scenes. The result was a fractured collective where loyalty was fragile and trust was scarce. Band members faced a constant push-pull between camaraderie and competition, between friendship and betrayal. For Bootsy Collins, this turmoil only deepened the wounds from his feud with George Clinton, cementing his decision to walk away. Parliament Funkadelic's internal feuds weren't just drama, they reshaped the band's legacy, showing how even the most brilliant musical collaborations can be undone by human conflict. The tension between Bootsy Collins and George Clinton wasn't just simmering, it had been building for years. And by the late 1970s and early 1980s, their feud finally boiled over into a breaking point neither could ignore. What had started as a promising partnership between two funk legends devolved into a bitter personal and professional battle that would change the course of both their lives forever. Bootsy's frustrations were fueled by years of feeling undervalued and overshadowed within Parliament Funkadelic. Despite being one of the band's brightest stars and a creative force in his own right, Bootsy often felt sidelined. Financial disputes only added to the strain. He discovered that George Clinton controlled much of the band's money and business decisions, often to Bootsy's disadvantage. The sense of being exploited and ignored slowly ate away at Bootsy's loyalty and patience. Unable to contain his anger any longer, Bootsy began openly criticizing George Clinton in interviews and public forums. A bold and risky move in the tight-knit and secretive world of Parliament Funkadelic, this public airing of grievances shocked fans and fellow musicians alike, signaling that the feud was no longer just private tension but a full-blown fracture. As Bootsy distanced himself from the band, the dynamic inside Parliament Funkadelic shifted dramatically. His departure wasn't just the loss of a band member, it was a painful farewell to a brotherhood he had once deeply believed in. The void left by Bootsy's exit was felt not only in the group's sound, but also in its spirit. Fans and fellow musicians sensed that the magic had dimmed, but Bootsy's split wasn't merely about the music, it was a stand against betrayal and exploitation, a refusal to continue being overshadowed and hurt. Walking away was his way of reclaiming control over his life and career after years of being pushed aside. Despite the bitterness, Bootsy went on to influence funk and music worldwide, building a successful solo career that allowed him to shine on his own terms. Yet the scars from his fallout with George Clinton remained. Bootsy never fully forgave George, carrying the pain of broken trust like a wound that refused to heal. Their story stands as a cautionary tale about how creative brilliance and brotherhood can be shattered by personal betrayal, and how some wounds, no matter how much time passes, never truly heal. Despite the bitter fallout with George Clinton and the painful breakup of Parliament Funkadelic, Bootsy Collins' legacy as one of funk's greatest icons remains untouchable. His story, however, is not just one of talent but also of resilience, of rising from betrayal and personal struggles to carve out his own path. After leaving Parliament Funkadelic, Bootsy faced the challenge of redefining himself outside the shadow of the band and the man he never forgave. He launched a solo career that allowed him to express his creativity without compromise. With his signature star-shaped sunglasses, flamboyant style, and infectious energy, Bootsy quickly became a solo star in his own right. His albums such as Bootsy, Player of the Year, and The One Giveth, The Count Taketh Away showcase not only his virtuoso bass playing, but also his ability to blend humor, funk, and social commentary into a unique musical experience. Bootsy proved he was more than a sidekick, he was a leader. Yet the feud with George Clinton left a lasting mark on Bootsy's life. In interviews, Bootsy has spoken about how the betrayal affected him deeply, fueling both anger and a drive to succeed on his own terms. Though he never publicly reconciled with Clinton, Bootsy found a way to move forward, focusing on his music, his fans, and his role as a funk ambassador. Bootsy's influence reached beyond funk. His style and sound inspired countless musicians across genres, from hip-hop to rock. His collaborations with artists like Prince, D.A. Light, and even contemporary stars cemented his place in music history. The story of Bootsy Collins is a complex one, a blend of genius, pain, and perseverance. The feud with George Clinton may have fractured a legendary partnership, but it also pushed Bootsy to become a symbol of artistic independence and strength. Ultimately, Bootsy Collins' legacy is not just about the funk he created, but about the personal battles he fought and the courage it took to rise above them, proving that sometimes the greatest music comes from the deepest wounds.